All right, we're live. What's up, party people? It's your host, Sunny Ray. This is Sunny Ray Show. I'm joined by my co-host, Danny. And today we're interviewing Rob Neely, who's on the other side of the world. That always gets me going, just the fact that it feels like we're in the same room. But how are you doing, Rob?
Hey, Sonny, very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, excited to kick this off. So like I was saying, is I like to start off with the pink elephant, right? Securely, beautiful logo. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do, and then we'll switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Look, Securely is a 6-year-old scale up now, and we're going through our Series B raise at the moment on a roadshow around the world. Securely, though, what it does and what it's built is a solution to the scam and frauds that occur on social media and marketplaces around the world. That's one of the solutions that we've built under patent. Uh, and how it works is your bank will actually verify your social media profile. So your bank will reach out to you because they already have all your details, Sonny. They've got everything, including your passport, driver's license. They know where you live. They've probably got your mortgage as well in most cases, right? So if your bank can verify your social media profile, whereas the big players, the big platforms don't want to verify people because having bots and fake profiles makes them an enormous amount of money every night through advertising, right? So they've got no interest in verifying people, but banks can do it. So what we have now is we have one of the largest businesses in the world, banking, that knows everything about us. And then you've got one of the other largest businesses in the world, which is social media or online platforms. You can be anyone. You can say, make it any name up you like and be anyone. So we call it a shadow identity. So that's what securely is. And out of that, we've also worked into the dating area as well. So our solution works on dating platforms. And we all know, or those that use dating platforms, I don't personally, but we all know the problems that occur on there. There's all sorts of catfishing goes on, and lots and lots of problems occur on dating platforms. So we've created a solution, and what we're seeing is that securely right now, with our patents that we have in place, has an intrinsic value of about $2.7 billion at the moment globally because of the patents being in place for the next 17 or 18 years. And we're also seeing, and you may have heard, but we're also seeing the governments around the world are now starting to take notice that social media profiles need to be verified and validated. And what they're starting with is a lot of them are actually mandating that under 16-year-old kids should not be on social media platforms. Now, that sort of started in France, and then Australia legislated it. And now it's running through country after country, actually making that a legal requirement that under 16-year-olds cannot be on social media, because you don't want them mixing with people who you don't know who they are, and they're mixing with adults. We don't let Danny run around with adults we don't know, right? So we want to know that the people looking after Danny or talking to Danny are absolutely beyond reproach. So governments are doing that, and even 4 or 5 states in the US have actually said they want to put it in place, which is quite astonishing given their love for the free rights and free speech. So we're right at that nexus at the moment, and we built that over the last 6 years. We actually started Securely for another entirely different reason 6 years in 2020, and that was, contractors or tradies and homeowners quite often rip each other off. Where you get your driveway done and they don't pay for the concreter, or the tradie gets paid up front and then doesn't do, or the contractor doesn't do the job. It happens right around the world. So we set out originally to solve that problem, which was to build an app like an Airbnb style app where people, the tradie and the customer, can put the money in the middle. The money's held securely, right? For both parts. And once the tradie or contractor provides the service, they get paid, and they know they're going to get paid. And out of that, in the middle of COVID, back in 21, 22, we noticed that contractors' wives were using our platform, our escrow platform, if you will, to go and buy on this thing called, and again, back in 21, this thing called Facebook Marketplace, right? it was just growing. Like Facebook Marketplace might have been in 15 or 17 countries back then. So it was, COVID made it shoot into the stratosphere in the peer-to-peer purchases. So we went, well, it's really interesting, and we built another app specifically for this new marketplace thing that was occurring. And then Australia's biggest player in banking noticed us and said, "Hey guys, what are you doing? It sounds really interesting. Can you come in and meet us, because we'd like to talk to you?" And that was really what I call the sliding door, or the pivotal moment, when all of a sudden we got to see behind the scenes in payments, which, to be honest, we knew very little about. I mean, my background before that was I took an animal health company global, right? So I've gone from animal health to fintech. I know I'm digressing into my history already, Sonny, but that's how Securely started. It started to solve the problem, because when people are ripped off in scams, they get very depressed. Scammers take all of their money sometimes. They're very vulnerable, and there was no practical solution at that point. And in fact, right now, the solution that we have to banks globally, it's still not in place anywhere, because we only started commercializing it about 6 or 8 months ago, once our patent got to a point where it was nice and secure, and we felt that we can go and commercialize it. So Securely went from trying to solve one problem, and we pivoted and pivoted and pivoted. What I call the sliding doors. You know, it's that Gwyneth Paltrow movie is a great, the sliding doors movie, where she takes one door and it changes her life. That's how Securely has really moved along 2020 to 2026, and now we're speaking with governments and monstrously large banks all over the world about licensing our solution, and the licensing is moving forward. So that's the 2 or 3 minute high level version of what Securely is.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. So I know we had like we have a interesting, engaging title, right? From $30 to 2.7 billion. So I guess my first question was, where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like? So maybe you can take that and segue into
Yeah.
the storyline around the $30.
I was born in 1960. So for your audience, I'm 65 at the moment. So I guess family were entrepreneurial in that they were running a small business in the 1960s. So wherever mum and dad were, I was there. And mum and dad had takeaway food stores, restaurants, and so forth. And you didn't get a chance to stay at home. You actually had to come and sit in the back of the restaurant or sit in the kitchen. And I watched dad obviously build businesses, build them and then sell them, then buy another one and then build it and sell it. So I suppose it's been bred into me. But the interesting part was, I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've only worked in corporate for about 2 or 3 years and didn't like it. But my first takeoff point was, I saw opportunity. We lived in Melbourne, Victoria at that time, which is, has cold winters and lovely summers, and has some great surfing spots. And I saw an opportunity as a 15-year-old that I could go and buy surfboards in winter when no one, and then resell them, clean them up and resell them. So my first seed round it's often joked, but my first seed round was $30. My mum and dad in 1975, and I remember it vividly. I walked into their bedroom and said, "Can I please borrow $30?" And that was an enormous amount of money back then. It's like 3 days' work for a teenager, getting $30. And they said, "Well, what do you want to use it for?" And I explained it. And so we went out first surfboard, and I basically cleaned it up, sold it for 60. Then I went and bought 2 surfboards, and on it went. So from 15 to 18, when I started in university, my dad would drive me all around the state, picking up surfboards from country towns in neglect, not wanted, and then I would go and sell them for double or triple the price. And that actually, by the time I turned 18, I had enough money to buy my first house before I went to university out of that business. So,
Oh, wow.
it's terrific. You sort of forget about that as your business life moves on. So I went to university, and then I started in entertainment. So that's my background. So I was in hospitality with mum and dad. I saw an opportunity, and that's what entrepreneurs do. They see an opportunity or find a solution to an existing problem. And it was really arbitrage. If you want to put a fancy name around it, what I was doing, it was arbitrage. But at 15, didn't think anything. I didn't even know that word at 15.
And your first ventures were in entertainment and publishing, right? So what were you doing, and what did you learn from those early days?
Yeah. So after I finished university, I worked for a hospitality group that had some large entertainment operations in the city of Melbourne in Australia, and I learnt a lot from some great mentors that were running the company. And I'm still in touch with them 50 years later. And that was in pubs, really. And back in the 70s, this was discos, this was Studio 54. It was a fantastic time. It was really exhilarating time because you didn't have dive bars open till 3 or 4 in the morning. All the bars shut at 9, 7 o'clock in the evening, and you could only go to these high-end nightclubs. So I learned a lot there. And what I took out of that was, okay, well, there was an existing problem for entertainment for teenagers in our city of, like, Melbourne probably had 3 million people back then, 50 years ago. So I saw an opportunity and I went out there and started opening up public halls on Saturday nights and running teenage discos or discotheques. And that was pretty novel because before that, they only had bands. Teenagers could only go and watch a band in a hall. No alcohol, of course. And in that first year of doing hall after hall after hall, driving around putting up, there was no social media, obviously. Weren't even computers really back then. But I had to go and put posters up in bus stops. The only way I could get to the teenagers was putting a poster up in a bus stop. So my days were spent putting posters up all over the suburbs and then hoping lots of kids would turn up on that following Saturday night. And I learnt a lot in that first couple of years, or the first year, in fact. And then I saw another opportunity of what were large roller skating rinks. And you know how big a roller skating rink can be. They can be massive, 1,000 square meters or more, or 3,000 feet in your language, you're over there. Um, and I wonder if I could actually move the public hall entertainment into the large roller skating rinks and make it what we know today is like a rave. Okay. And so I took a leap of faith. Um, Again, borrowed a whole bunch of money, and we opened up the first one in Melbourne in the outer suburbs, and we had 3,500 kids turn up on the first night. It was it was absolutely astonishing, and to see the kids about an hour before we opened the doors, 1,000 of them milling in the car park was just exhilarating. And I was probably 23, 24 at that stage. So that led me into the world of entertainment. We ended up having those large venues all over the place. Every single Saturday night, we'd have two or three of these running with 2,000 or 3,000 kids in place. And we use entertainment, and the entertainers would go from one venue to the other. And of course, I ended up with 3 roller skating rinks. We ended up buying the rinks themselves. And so probably by the age of 25, I had 3 rinks, a lot of entertainment assets, and we sold all of that. And that was probably my first semi-retirement, I guess. I was able to then buy into a fairly affluent suburb in Melbourne at a very young age, I've got to say, and bought all the toys. Got an aeroplane, got my pilot's license, did everything you could possibly imagine a 25-year-old could want to spend his money on, he did. And then that led me back into nightclubs again. And for the next 5 to 6 years, we built and owned some of the largest entertainment venues in that city, and moreover, Australia-wide. So some very, very, very big nightclubs. And sold out of that, went to my mum. By this stage, I bought a farm and had horses, and really enjoying life. And then I had the opportunity to buy a newspaper, and that's where I lost an enormous amount of money. So it's all it's not all unicorns and rainbows. Being a founder, I bought the newspaper. I actually bought it it was previously owned by Rupert Murdoch, who pretty much the globe, everyone knows. And I can't tell you the amount of millions that I lost on that newspaper. But it was a great learning experience. It really was. And along the way, at this point, it was probably 1995, about the time Windows 95 came out, right? So computers were becoming stationary in offices. Everyone had them. And I remember loading up Windows 95. You had like 18 disks you had to put in. It took hours to load it up. And then emails became available. So, we started using that where we could in the newspaper. And here's another sliding door moment. So I had the newspaper running, and we had a great big, what they call a turf, like a racing section in the newspaper, right, for the trots and the greyhounds and the thoroughbreds. And I realised, and it was right again. This was right at the point that mobile phones were becoming ubiquitous, and then we got texts on mobile phones, and I thought, wouldn't that be good if we could get every one of our people that buys the newspaper, get their phone number, and I could text them tips, right? The idea was on a Saturday, we would text them tips, and they would pay for those tips. This is commonplace these days, right? But back in 95, 2000, it was anything but. And one of the greatest opportunity losses of all time occurred because I went and sought advice from an IP attorney. And he could not, for the life of him, understand what I was talking about. Again, mobile phones were relatively new, and so were texts, and they were on green screens. They were nothing like the iPhones that we've got today. These were just little green screens, read text on and sent from Sonny to Rob. And trying to explain, I wanted him to put a pattern around this. And I said, no one's ever thought of this. And back then you had no internet to look around the world and find out, had it been done anywhere else. But as it turned out, it was. And this guy could not get his head around it. And one of the greatest learnings, Sonny, from that was at that point, because that cost me potentially hundreds of millions of dollars back then because of what it would have meant globally in the context of gambling and so forth. But I learnt out of that. So the opportunity cost that I learnt that the most expensive advice you can get is the cheapest advice. If you go out and hire a cheap attorney or a cheap accountant, you will get bad advice. And from that year onwards, I've only ever used the absolute best of the best that I could afford. Obviously, I can't afford, sometimes I can't afford everything I want, but right now I still use that to this day. So the journey up until say 2000 was a learning, but at that stage I was coming up to 40 years of age and had lost a heap of money, had a IP attorney that really didn't know what he was doing, and my opportunity cost there was enormous. I mean, having that patent around that for the next 20 years, from 2020 to pretty much 2000 to 2020, I should say. You could only imagine, even if I was paid 2 or 3 cents for every transaction on a betting app, right? You can imagine how much that would bring in every year, because there's billions and billions and billions and billions of bets placed every year, hundreds of billions. So that would have been great, but I had bad advice. And from that, I got out of the newspaper, thank God, lost, as I said, an enormous amount of money, retired back to my horse farm with my tail between my legs, almost with nothing, just had my real estate assets and my aeroplane at the time. Still, we've kept the planes, even though they're very costly. But I was on the horse farm and had thoroughbreds, and we were buying and selling a few. We were training them because I've been riding since I was a child. I've been riding horses since I was 6 years or 5 years of age. And my extended family were dairy farmers. So it just comes with the territory. And we were probably buying at that stage, when I was, again, semi-retired with very little money, we were probably buying and selling 100 horses a year. So 2 to 3 a week we were buying and selling. into the equestrian market. And again, it was an opportunity there where same as the surfboards, I could buy the surfboards looking ugly, tidy it up and sell it. And that's what we did with these horses. But what I learned out of it was that there was the animal feed market was fundamentally owned by the large corporations, and they used, of course, the cheapest material they could when they were making horse pellets and animals. And you probably paid $15 back then for a bag of horse feed, maybe $20. And we put together some internal recipes on the farm, adding various things that we'd seen around the world. And one was a cereal meal. And a cereal meal is fundamentally a fancy name for breadcrumbs, if you will. But we know what breadcrumbs, we know what bread does if you keep eating it, right? It makes you pretty large. In fact, the carbohydrates turn into and then turns into fat. And we applied adding the cereal meal to our own horses, and people started mentioning to us on the Sundays at the horse shows and the show jumping events, golly, your horses look great. What are you feeding them? And we'd say, we make our own mix up. And it was quite extraordinary. We offered to make a couple of bags for some friends and sold them to them, and word spread. Now, we had no idea about manufacturing. We had no idea about animal health. We were just horse people on our farm outside of the major capital city. That led to more people buying it, more people ringing us up saying, can we come and get you? We didn't even have a brand for it, but we knew what it did. It made horses look big, shiny, and if you want to use the term fat, but we called it weightlifter. And it was called, the actual horse feed was called weightlifter because that's what it did. It says what it does. And we used to sell it in the old calico bags, and we put a trademark around it, and it looked great. And we were then probably selling 20 bags a week, and then 40 bags a week, and people just coming to our farm literally to buy this horse feed that we had built the recipe for. It got so bad that we had stopped selling it from the farm because people were turning up and leaving money under the door or under the gumboot and saying, I've grabbed a couple of horse feed. But there was a $5,000 saddle next to the bag that they took, and they could have taken the saddle as well. So we ended up stopping it, and then we put it in the local store. And this was all over about 1 year. And again, we didn't know what we were doing. Had nice branding, and we said, right, so we put it into the local produce store, and we then redirected people to the local produce store. A long story quick, that then multiplied out within the next 2 years. We multiplied that out to 3,000 stores Australia-wide. So we moved out of our stables where we were making it with my wife. My wife would come in and hand sew the bags, and then we'd sell it to people. We moved out of that. We got our first little tree where I did work myself, lifting the bags, making the feed. We bought a mixer. Within 2 years, we had a factory with 18 staff. We had tractor trailers or semi-trailers, call them over here, turning up non-stop from 6 a.m. 2 years later, we were doing $1 million a month in horse feed right around Australia. So again, self-taught, but understood that we had something quite unique. And then again, this is very similar to Securely, right? Very, very unique what we've got with Securely. But one of the things was we were selling most of the horse feed to equestrians, so horse riders, right? The ones that spend an enormous amount on their trailers and their horses and keeping them shiny and going to shows on the weekend. They'll spend anything, right? And we had to work out, and this goes back to my learnings, to the learnings of being in entertainment. And I thought at an early stage in entertainment, if you want to get people's attention back before social media, you had to include one of 3 words in your marketing, which was win or free or sex. And win, free or sex would get people to pay attention, prior to social media, right? So if you think about the tabloids from England and some of the tabloids that Murdoch owned at the time, they sold it on the basis of page 3 girls, and people bought it basically on the sex side, and then they provided competitions. So I said, how do we apply this to the horse feed market? So mainly most of the advertising was showing beautiful buxom horses with ribbons and stuff around them. And I said to Lisa, I said, you know what? What about if we actually used a couple of male models, right, to advertise our horse feed? And she said, sounds great. What do you got in mind? And I said, well, let's hire a couple of models, or we'll hire a model. We'll get some shots done out in a rustic setting, and we'll put it in the national magazine, the Horse Magazine, which came out once a month. And that was the turning point for Weightlifter. That's what turned it into $1 million a month sales, because we had these guys sitting there in their blue singlets, very attractive, apparently, I'm told. And of course, the women went crazy. They absolutely went crazy over it. So it got the word spread right around Australia. That led, of course, on to sales around the world. We then again took another opportunity outside of the feed itself, and realized this was probably 15 years ago now, that well, not a lot of, all human medicines are at some point tested on animals on their way through to being approved by the FDA or the relevant drug authority in each country. But most of the large pharmaceutical companies, they just were putting these tests, the animal tests, they spend millions on, putting them on a shelf, letting them gather dust. And I realized I bought one technology that was exactly that. I bought it for pennies in the dollar, literally pennies in the dollar, and applied it back, because they'd already done all the exhaustive testing, put it straight into the market back in for animals. And then that became a realization that it wasn't just the one that I had. There were dozens of human medicines that were in the human market but weren't being used for the animal testing that they had. So we ended up buying many of those. And then we took the company global. We set up our head office in Kansas City in the US, which is the animal health capital of the world, by the way. And hello to everyone in Kansas City. And then we rolled out over the next few years. We would have 35 or 40 technologies, and it was all sorts of animals, for dogs, cats, you name it, swine. Because if you think about it, the animal health market is every bit as big as the human pharmaceutical market. So by this stage, we've got a small micro global company running, headed out of Kansas City. And we pretty much still had the horse feed company running. That ran for 20 years or more before we sold it. But all of this was opportunity. All of this was coming into an industry and looking at it from a different perspective, which is exactly what occurred with Securely. We came in and went, why can't you do it the other way around? Everyone 5 years ago was looking at, well, how do we solve this problem with social media platforms? They won't certify them, so we can't fix the problem. You either had to use outside escrow, like, okay, or just trust. And the trust, of course, is where the scams and the fraud, because people use that leverage to steal from other people, which is, as I said earlier, it's absolutely disgraceful that they do it. So coming in from the outside, quite often you can see that people that are embedded in the industry, and in particular payments right now, and this fintech industry that I'm in, you can see it from another perspective. You're not blinkered in the requirement of what you've been taught on your way through. And that's what happened again. So it doesn't matter whether it's surfboards or hotels. I won't talk about the newspapers, but or the horse feed. We looked at it from an alternate perspective. Mind you, the newspapers would have gone well if that IP knew had any idea what I was talking about, right? But anyway, that's another story. But so Securely has been born out of that 50 years of innovation, and the want for me to take that leap of faith where other people won't, or they can't see it. In fact, when we started the horse feed company, I mentioned earlier, most of the horse feed bags at that time were about $15, $20. Our bag cost $35 in the shops, and people kept telling me it won't sell, it won't sell. And then, of course, it did sell because it actually provided results, the results that people wanted. So again, it's innovating in a market that has existing players there that are blinkered by what you can and can't do. And I think that's, if you look at some of the very successful entrepreneurs around the world, whether it's the Snapchat guys or the large players in digital, or Richard Branson, it's the one common theme appears to me is that they all look at an existing market or problem in a different way. Okay, and Branson's a great case in point. I mean, he started Virgin Atlantic Air because the service he was getting on the airline he was using at the time was terrible, and he's right, and he was absolutely right. And that's how entrepreneurs think. I mean, I still to this day, I'm 65 at the moment. I turn 66 next month, and I'm getting ready to step back. I really am. I've got to tell you, age catches up. Age does catch up with you. But we have another opportunity with Securely, which is to build Securely Pay. So it's not just licensing to the banks; it's actually to build what they call a third-party PSP. And for your listeners, a third-party PSP is similar to GPay or Apple Pay. So it's not actually a bank. Google doesn't not have a bank underneath it. It relies on the underlying system there already, and then it provides a payment platform for it. So Securely has the opportunity to go from around a $3 billion intrinsic value, which is what the company's valuation is at the moment, to about 30 or 40 billion if we can action and execute Securely Pay as a third-party payment service provider sitting beside Pay and Apple Pay and Stripe and the others. And that's what we intend to do. The reason being is we have that vertical covered. We've got it locked in under patent. And out of opportunity, out of a sliding door, we saw that, as I said, the dating industry needed the same sort of security, needed the same sort of KYC added to it. So we've done that, and we're now mentoring, and now we're taking on new innovative entrepreneurs and young people that are coming up with some great digital platforms. But I've probably talked for 20 or 30 minutes now. I'm not sure what else I can say.
No, I think you've been great. But I was going to say, I don't know what happened. My camera just kind of died. But we are also at the end of our time. So Rob, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I did have a whole bunch of other questions. So maybe when I get my camera fixed, we could do like a part 2. But good thing it went down right at the end. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. And Rob, thank you for your time again. We'll talk again soon. Cheers.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Rob, just hang on for 1 second. Let me bring